Now, this is a frustrating and concerning time for Atlantic Canadians who are hoping to travel to Cuba. Airlines are canceling routes to the island as the government warns airports are nearly out of jet fuel. The U.S. has blocked fuel from being exported from Venezuela, which is pushing the small island nation towards the brink of collapse. Just imagine what it would be like to live in these conditions. Here to try to make sense of it all is Robert Huish, Associate Professor of International Development Studies at Dalhousie University. Good morning, Robert. How are you this morning?
Great, Crystal, thanks. Looking forward to doing some snowblowing
Well,
this
yes,
morning.
indeed. Oh, gosh, I know that you have an article coming out in the conversation later today on this very issue. Just how dire is the situation in Cuba right now?
Well, just as you painted, if you're a traveler having hoped to go to Cuba, you're in more for an adventure rather than a vacation. And for many political watchers of Cuba, if the belief is that somehow Donald Trump's oil embargo will somehow shatter the government there, it's probably going to be a very drawn out process for the next year. And if you are Cuban, brace for a nightmare. This is going to be a really difficult time for Cuba, possibly one of the worst situations in the entire 67-year history of the Cuban Revolution. To put it all on the table, Cuba's economy has been in complete free fall since the end of 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic in full swing, and they just haven't been able to recover. So what we're seeing in Cuba is a mix of internal issues that have gone on at the hands of the government there, but also extensive international pressure by the Trump government on Cuba. And this is different from the other sort of Donald Trump bullying that we've seen around the world, because where most of his bellicosity has come from executive orders, the United States has a 60-year history of using economic weapons against Cuba. So what we're seeing today, the stranglehold on fuel, the lack of imports of food, the lack of imports of medicine, that has been ingrained in congressional acts that have passed through Washington since the 1960s. In particular, acts that target foreign countries from dealing with Cuba directly. So unlike a presidential threat, this has actually got congressional backing in the U.S., and now we're seeing the full flex come into effect.
What's the end game here? Why is the United States picking on Cuba?
Well, there's two goals to it. One is very strategic, and this is where Marco Rubio thinks that he's got the chessboard in his favor. And simply put, is that there's over 2 million Cuban exiles that live in the United States. Many of them are in Florida, some in New Jersey, some in Texas. And those combined put together some pretty important congressional and presidential electoral college votes. So since Bill Clinton, the strategy of appealing to Cuban exile communities for political votes has been part of presidential gaming, shall we say. But the other thing with it is that right now you've also had another 2 million Cubans leave since 2021. So there's a huge deficit in population there. The population has decreased, and those who have left since that time are often younger and very well educated. So we hear all about Cuba having great number of doctors, nurses, engineers, even top athletes. Well, many of those people between the ages of 18 and 42 have left. So you're seeing now companies like Sherritt International, a Canadian mining company that operates in Cuba, saying we might have to get out of here because not only do we have an oil shortage, but we also have nobody here to fix anything if it breaks. So there's no engineers. And this is where the strategy of Trump trying to just sort of control the Americas comes into it. But we're seeing that right now it's such a moment for a humanitarian crisis to break out. And just to paint that picture, you've seen inflation go over 15% in Cuba informally, but in the informal economy, it's closer to 70%. Tropical diseases like dengue, chikungunya, Opeche virus, they're breaking out in the cities because the municipal waste trucks haven't been able to function correctly since last year due to a lack of parts, lack of fuel. We've even seen now that health indicators in Cuba, like infant mortality, have escalated from 5 deaths per thousand to now 14 per thousand in late 2025. For Cuba to be such a powerful player in health before then, it's a real tragedy. And the desperation's picking up. We've seen another 5,000 Cubans actually leave the country to join as mercenaries alongside Russia to fight with Ukraine. And For anyone who knows Cuba well, we know that these last few years just don't make sense in terms of what we would expect out of Cuban government or the Cuban people.
Well, Robert, we really thank you this morning for sharing these thoughts, and I do look forward to reading your article in The Conversation, which comes out later today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Crystal.
All right, we do have to take a break. It is 8:28. We'll be back to wrap up the show right after this.